So, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in a couple minutes, but just to kick us off, my name is Jennifer Slattery with the League of Cities and Towns. I know many of you on here, but not everyone, so I just wanted to introduce myself. I do the professional development training for the League, and today we're excited to have our colleagues here to discuss some food waste policies and procedures that ultimately are good cost savings measures for your cities and towns. But I think to go ahead and get started, because we have a nice small group today, I would love it if we could just take a moment to have each of you just introduce yourselves, where you're from, and maybe let us know if you have any policies in place currently within your city or town that deal with food waste. That would be, I think, good to know as we go forward with the information. Mike, do you mind starting?
No, Mike Wood, the town manager of Burrville, and no, we don't have any policies as relates to food waste.
Thanks. Jean, do you want to go next?
Gene Allen.
Oh, sorry.
Gene Allen, I'm the Public Works Director in Smithfield. Well, we don't have any policies, but we're doing a pilot program right now with our school system in the kitchen, and we're also partnering with Fidelity. They have a digester at their facility that we're looking at just the scraps from the preparation at this point.
Okay, good to know. So there's two Jeans.
Hi, my name is Gene Barrows. I'm the Public Works Director with the City of Center Falls, and we do not currently have any such policy in place.
Okay. All right. I think many of you joined us a little bit after my intro. So if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to, if you are comfortable, love to learn about where you're from and if your community has any current policies addressing food waste. Michael, are you I got your audio going. I think you might be able to talk now. Michael, Sarah, no. All right, Edward Tanner, we can see you. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, good morning. My name's Ed from the planning department here in Bristol. Just interested in this topic. It's something that our Conservation Commission's been talking about for a long time with our DPW. So just interested in learning what other communities are doing.
Great, thank you.
Hey, this is Mike Sarah. Can you hear me now?
We can.
I should do a Verizon commercial. Town of Westerly, manager of sanitation here. We don't currently have policies in place.
Okay. All right, well, thanks for coming. Let's see who else. Victoria, are you able to take yourself off mute?
Hello, I can do video as well. My name is Victoria Cole. I'm the zoning official / ADA coordinator for the city of Woonsocket. And I'm not sure if you have any food waste programs available at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. All right, go down to my bottom row. Kate, are you there?
I am here.
Hi,
Hi, so Kate Michaud, town manager in the town of Warren. We don't currently have any policies, although we did lease some space to the compost plant at one point so they could operate on town property, but we never really got a program going with them and they've moved on elsewhere. So just interested in basically anything that will reduce our the amount of waste that we're sending to the landfill.
Sure, great. Thanks, Kate. And I see Rick. I don't know if Rick can take himself off mute there. There we go.
Hi.
Hi.
We tried this, I think a while ago with the school department. It didn't work through, it was too contaminated.
Oh.
But obviously we're here to see what else is offered.
Great. And what community are you with, Rick?
City of Pawtucket.
Pawtucket. All right, great. And I also see Chris Crowley.
Good morning, everyone. Chris Crawley, City of Pawtucket. Rick just answered that we don't have a program right now with the city, so we're looking to see if something that we can take from this meeting and institute a program.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. I at this point will turn it over to Heather Billings, who's the with the Center for Ecotechnology. We are excited to have her here to join us. And Heather, you have a presentation, so if you are ready to share your screen, please feel free. And introduce yourself with a more robust background than I was able to give you. I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Is it showing properly?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I am Heather Billings. I work at the Center for Ecotechnology, and we are an environmental nonprofit that is based in Massachusetts, but we do work from Maine to Maryland. We work in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, some various states and cities across the United States. And we assist businesses and institutions with reducing waste, starting or expanding programs, and also can work with municipalities on how they can work with their businesses and institutions as well. We've also done some work in schools. And I guess my purpose today is to just introduce us so that you can contact us later with questions about like, where are the resources that we talked about? How can we help? So our tagline is helping people and businesses save energy and reduce waste. And we do that in a variety of ways and with a variety of partners. So in, whether it's state funded or federal funded or private funded, there's different ways that we can piece together assistance so that there's no cost to the municipality or the business school institution for our assistance. So in Rhode Island, we have got, we worked with Clean Ocean Access, Rhode Island DEM, 11th Hour Racing. We've got some USDA and RUS, the Rural Utility Service funding, so we can kind of work with those. So, again, I would just encourage you to just contact us and we'll just see how we can work together. So the reason we're talking about food waste is just that so much of what's grown, purchased, prepared of food is wasted. And it's just such a large cost in dollars and also energy and resources, and then it ends up in the landfills or other waste to energy facilities, and it's truly wasted at that point. So we are working to do our part to reduce that. So in Rhode Island, those calculations end up with being this staggering 100,000 tons of food being thrown away, plus at the same time, there's food insecurity. So our work in Rhode Island, we do a lot of presentations to try to reach people and kind of where they are and get the message to them about kind of the problem and possible solutions. So we do presentations, mostly webinars, but some in person. The advantage, what we found, unfortunately, due to COVID, is that we are able to do these virtually, and so more people can attend. But it's really great to be in person. And I've got a couple of examples of that later. And since 2017, we've assisted businesses and institutions to divert over 2,000 tons, mostly of food waste, annually. So we work on the food recovery hierarchy with just starting at the top with the just reducing the amount of surplus food that is generated, thrown away, and even composted. Like, why prepare food just to compost it? So if people can look at what they are purchasing and what materials are being discarded, then they can make other decisions, such as using the ingredients in soups and stocks, not purchasing as much, changing their prep methods to kind of just-in-time cooking, that type of thing. And definitely working with feeding people. So looking at donation of the excess edible food that that doesn't need to be thrown away or sent for composting, anaerobic digestion. And so when we are starting on the hierarchy, a lot of times people are saying, we want to start a composting program. And that's great, but that's kind of lower down. So, but if we found that when they start to do a separation program and are looking at the materials that are being generated, they start looking back up the hierarchy and thinking of other things that can be done with it, such as the donation and reduction. We have a technical assistance program. I'm actually one of the folks that does the on-site technical assistance. So going to businesses and institutions and looking at what they're currently doing and then helping understand the process and their goals and then help them get from A to B. So one of the things that we do is this food scrap sign that's up on the left-hand side. We can create PDF signage of specific items that a business or institution would have that they're looking to separate, coordinate that with the hauler and then the end site to be able to create a seamless as possible program to reduce contamination, optimize sorting, and the idea is that it would work for everybody along the way. So looking at a kind of a municipal compost program can work back up to getting the right food scraps that would work. We also have a lot of resources on our websites, and they are available. And kind of talking about throwing away, just what we talked about before, but throwing away food is throwing away money. The way to contact us is our hotline or email and our website. So our technical assistance it's not cookie cutter, even though there's some similarities between businesses and institutions that they generate materials, they need to move them to a place where they're picked up or they self-transport. They're all a little bit different. And so that's kind of fun to have a puzzle to figure out what materials are generated, whether it's recycling, food scraps, and there may be other materials too. Looking at the opportunities in the area of how to prevent, recover, donate, or divert, proper separation. We have something called a facilities materials management. It's a fillable PDF tool, and so it can be used as a training tool if a business, school, etc., is separating a material. It says how to prepare it, what it looks like. You can add pictures, description, who to contact if there's a question about it. It just puts all of the material streams in one spot. We have the waste bin signage that we talked about, and then we can connect with service providers. In addition, we've got the compost site technical assistance. So this is kind of as funds allow, but we've got some funding with the USDA that we can help compost sites if they are looking to start or expand collecting food waste. And there's a spreadsheet of best practices and talks about recipe development, the site layout. Needs to be a site that's either already permitted or going down the process to be permitted. And then we do have workshops, and there's one coming up on May 11th. It is in Massachusetts, so out-of-state folks would be bumped if there was a lot of Massachusetts interest. But that link is here, and I can put it in the chat as well if someone is interested in attending. And this is a great toolkit also, kind of BioCycle, fantastic resource, helped us put this together. And it's a fantastic document. And so I'd encourage you to check this out. There's USDA funding available also to assist the businesses, assist municipalities with food waste reduction and composting. And that deadline is, let's see, I think June 15th. And so there's a link, and I'll also put that in the chat when it's Murray's turn. And here's some examples of what USDA has supported. We also have spotlights on the website. So it's great to see stories, success stories, even some challenges of what other businesses and institutions and schools have done. And we love doing that because we want to just make it relatable to start a program. So the Barrington Farm School, I actually probably took these pictures. I attended the Compost Site Technical Assistance Day, where the school was looking to have some technical assistance to expand and optimize their compost program. They have some machinery. There was some hand work on the compost site. They had a variety of ingredients that they use. I think you can see pumpkins there. There's food scrap drop off. And they also have a bicycle collection. And so they bring all this material in, and then it was more than a 3-bin system. It was kind of a 6-bin system, but just moving it along and processing it and making this beautiful material. And no odor, just really well managed. And so this is a great example of a success story of being able to process food scraps into beautiful soil. What municipalities can do and other partners is share our information to get the word out that these resources exist, this free support exists. So we've developed kind of plug and play materials to put on a website and just make it easy to share. The workshops that we've done, these 3 were in person. And so we are absolutely in Rhode Island. These 3 were last year, but we just, okay, so then with kind of local support, local hauler, food waste diversion, food rescue organization, and then there's another hauler, but highlighting what the businesses are doing and what they can do. These were very successful. And then just last month, We did one this year. So these recordings are available as well. So I am happy to answer questions now or later on.
Great. Any questions for Heather at the moment? We'll cue Murray to get ready with his slides. Michael.
I have a quick question. Do you do presentations to like a farmer's market or something like that? Would you be willing to attend a farmer's market with a display or something like that? Or something along those lines?
So, it's always a maybe, and, where it would kind of, if we could coordinate that with some site visits to reduce travel, that would be fantastic. What kind of topic would you see us presenting, and to who? To the residents that are attending, or to the vendors that they could do some composting of their materials?
So the farmer's market has stations for food, but it also has displays for other people and other topics that may be sort of related to it.
Yep.
It's only during the summer, and put up a little stand or something, maybe a demonstration or something along those lines. I'm just curious if you do things like that.
Yes, we have, and I'd like to kind of talk about it further, because we want to meet people where they are. They don't really have time to come to us to a presentation sometimes. So if we can go to something that's already established, that's great.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Heather, Mike Sarah from town of Westerly. I got a couple of questions if you could answer them for me.
Sure.
When do you anticipate, well, let me rephrase. First of all, 2,000 tons of diverted material in the big picture is a very minuscule amount. It's commendable, but like in my town, I think we take, I think we probably haul 20,000 tons a year.
Mhm.
By contrast, it's a small amount. Let me put it in perspective. But the thing is, it resembles recycling a lot. There's a lot of information that people need to retain and learn. There's tons and tons and tons of material available. But I think the complexity of it is daunting to most people. Do you foresee a simplified version? Because really, this is just going back to our roots. I mean, this is what they used to do in the old days.
Mhm.
But now it's just so simple to buy prepared things. It's simple to throw it in the garbage bag in the kitchen versus putting it in a scraps bucket, carrying it outside, put it in the composter. I'm sure you're fully aware of all the pitfalls that are involved in it. Do you see an easy way to accomplish this coming down the pipe in the near future, barring any type of serious laws that get passed? That was a lot to digest, and
It is. And
I'll wait.
I'm happy to have anyone else weigh in, on this as well. No, I guess is kind of the question that I see right off, is that it's just like you say, we're used to just throwing things away. And so to be able to show the opportunity to divert food scraps for higher and better use, for composting, animal feed, anaerobic digestion, that message is kind of one at a time still. So going through the schools, I think, is a great way to kind of expand the the spread of information. And I'm not going to get the words right, but the law or the regulation of districts that have over 30 tons per year need to start a program in Rhode Island. So those, like that message is going to come through the schools, to the students, to the families. Some service providers are doing curbside pickup as part of their work in Rhode Island as well. And then, so what, what Murray's going to talk about is other composting methods, not just picking up and having somebody else do it. But I think we have some work cut out for us.
I agree, and I agree that the schools are the place to start. Is there, and I don't mean to take up all your time, but is there any push to actually include this in school curriculum? I mean, if we teach these kids this, they're going to teach the adults.
I can't answer that question about including in Rhode Island curriculum.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I will share, this is Murray Gates, and I'll do a fuller introduction in a moment, but in response to your question around how do we do this at a larger scale, part of it we'll talk about by promoting private entities to enter into the composting industry. But another part, and as it relates to this audience for municipal composting, there are a number of pilot programs and full-on implementation of food waste diversion at the municipal level that have been successful throughout the country. And I think CET also has some documentation, or I have some documentation that came from either CET or another nonprofit that looks at those models and could be points of departure for you. Additionally, I'll share with you that the entire state of California has mandated composting at every level. Every household, every business has to compost starting January 1st of this year. So they are going to build up such a wealth of learning for us as to how to deploy these systems. They're on the bleeding edge.
Thanks, Murray. I appreciate that.
You bet. You bet. Any other questions for Heather?
I would love to, if there are any more, we'll do them at the end, because I think Murray's going to cover a lot of information here that I'm interested in seeing again.
Sure. Okay, so I guess that's my cue to go ahead and kick it off. Thanks very much, Heather and Jennifer, for providing us this opportunity, and for all of you for attending. I've been really looking forward to interacting with this audience. You guys play an extremely important role in, in the desire that many of us have to divert food waste from landfills and use that resource for compost. So as Heather had mentioned, composting is kind of down on the line of priorities as it relates to food waste diversion. And I, as a advocate for composting, advocate very heavily for all of those higher level and higher value strategies, such as just reducing the amount of food waste that we start with, to using food waste to create energy. All of those are great uses. Composting is just one food waste strategy, but it's an important one. And as was said here by one of the attendees, it's an age-old practice. It goes back millennia for enriching our soils. Oh, I don't know, I started at the end. Page down, there we go. Okay, so I'd like to start, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So Murray Gates, I live in South Kingstown, born and bred down here. I've spent most of my career in corporate, various corporate roles throughout Rhode Island and beyond. But over the last few years, I've been getting engaged in this wonderful realm of composting, and in particular with two organizations, which I'm showing here. One is the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, which is a fabulous nonprofit specific to Rhode Island and similar works in a similar realm as does CET in Massachusetts, and they're both great organizations. The Food Policy Council advocates for improvements to our food system holistically, right? The entire element of the food system, from the growers to the other end, where we try to find solutions for our food waste. And you can see here on the graphic on the right that food waste is just one element of our food systems. The other organization, the U.S. Compost Council, is a national organization that advocates for compost manufacturers as well as compost use. And I list the Food Policy Council first because I've joined their food waste work group. And the U.S. Compost Council, I'm not only a member, but also trying to advance, along with a number of other stakeholders, the creation of a state chapter of the U.S. Compost Council. And when that's up and running, it's running in about 15 other states. But when it's active in the state of Rhode Island, we would be more than happy to partner with communities that want to have representation at a farmer's market, at a school, anywhere else, or to introduce some of the great partners such as CET or Clean Ocean Access that are, acknowledge the importance of education and getting the word out about composting. So looking forward to being a partner with many of you within the municipalities going forward. The last thing that I'll mention on this slide is what I've highlighted here. And these are some of the really important benefits that we get from composting. First and foremost, healthy soils. And I talked about the millennia old practice of composting, and it's really about enriching our soils and creating healthy soil structure, reducing erosion, which all leads to clean air and water, a stable climate, and a regenerative society. Not to mention the cost benefits that come from food waste diversion and no longer having to ship this golden resource from our disparate communities up to a central landfill. Don't want to insult your intelligence with a question about what is composting, but there are a couple of fine tuning around the definition, which I think is important for us to consider. The U.S. Compost Council has a definition here. I won't read through all of it, but I've highlighted a couple important elements. One is the controlled nature of composting. Many of us are aware of compost facilities or folks that just compost in their backyard, and they throw a pile of organic materials together and hope that it turns out to be something great. The U.S. Compost Council really believes in the controlled creation of compost, which requires some knowledge of how to compost, how to balance the ingredients, create a recipe for a truly valuable soil, and one that's not going to create more harm than good in the environment. And it is an aerobic process, meaning that air is circulated through the materials and allows for the microorganisms to do their thing in terms of composting, and the reduction of pathogens and weed seeds. This is something that is not typically enabled within smaller scale, like backyard composting. But those microorganisms that take care of pathogens and weed seeds only thrive in warmer temperatures. Generally, we talk about thermophilic temperatures, which start at 131 degrees and go to above 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Creating those temperatures is a result of a good recipe and good management. And within the Composting Council, we are very big on promoting best practice standards that allow for these results of good compost. The next question that I pose rhetorically is who makes compost? And you can see some different versions of composting here. And this is important, particularly for the regulator community, because different scale of composting and different types and approaches of composting deserves different approaches in terms of regulation and for land use. Very typically on the far right-hand side, backyard composting, which many of you may do, is really, from my perspective and from many perspectives, is the ideal of composting, right? It allows us to avoid the cost of transporting both the waste as well as the end product. We can use it on our own properties. That type of composting is generally not treated within regulations. It's usually up for the homeowner to do their own composting and create their own best practices. Now, as we move our way to the left, and we start with, to the right, we have agricultural composting, which is normally defined by the use of feedstocks that are primarily generated on site and primarily used, the final result, the final compost, generally used on site as well. And as we get further to the right, we have both small and large scale composting, which comes in many different flavors and sizes. Within the small scale variety, the top photo here is of what's called an in-vessel composting system. It's a little bit more complicated and rigorous than some traditional methods. It requires a larger investment, but you are able to control the environment and the feedstocks a little bit better given the nature of the in-vessel systems. The second picture in the small scale is what most people usually think of when they think of composting. It's done in windrows, normally no larger than 7 feet tall, and often on an impermeable surface like what you see here, a cement pad. And as you move into the larger systems, you have greater investment, larger footprints, larger throughput. You can see here a purpose-built windrow turner, which is used to aerate the compost. And below, still under large composting systems, you can see something that's encapsulated within a building. And of course, that requires a larger investment as well. But I show you this to say that there's a large variety of compost systems which should be considered during regulation and during the determination of land use. It's not a one size fits all. So within the environment or the ecosystem of regulation in the state of Rhode Island, the Department of Environmental Management is the state regulator, which focuses primarily on the operational controls. And its functions include here, which I have highlighted, the issuance of licenses, the management of complaints, conducting inspections, and for some scale systems, they'll inspect on a yearly basis, and determining the violations. And DEM does shut down compost sites. So you as a municipality should know that there is this entity within DEM that regulates fairly tightly the composters out there. And they within DEM, they do segregate, similar to the previous slide, different composting systems. So they'll issue licenses both for agricultural composting and for what they term as solid waste composting facilities. Now, within the Compost Council, we like to ask municipalities to think of composting as something other than solid waste, because we want to avoid creating regulations that are aligned with solid waste, whereas composting is a different animal. It's not, it falls within the solid waste mindset because it's often handled similarly in some respects, but it really is a resource that should be treated differently than just the trash that we're throwing into the central landfill. I'll go back to this slide just to reiterate something that Heather had shared, and many of you are aware that within the state of Rhode Island, there is a law that requires generators of solid waste, private generators, to find an alternative to sending the waste to the central landfill, including composting. There's actually legislation that's going through now that would lower the threshold from 2 tons to 1 ton per week generated, as well as the radius. Today, the radius is 15 miles between a generator and a compost site to 30 miles. So one of the things to think about is members of your community, private generators that are in that realm are of generators, that they will at some point be asked to put a plan together to compost at a compost site, to have their waste sent to compost sites. The DEM doesn't currently regulate this very tightly. They don't enforce it very tightly, principally because we don't have sufficient number of compost sites that are licensed to handle food waste. And that's where the municipalities will come in. Here is a list that was recently sent to me by DEM of sites throughout the state of Rhode Island that are licensed compost facilities. You can see just the one at the very top, Earth Care Farm. That's the only site that we have in Rhode Island that's licensed for putrescible waste. There may be actually another one that for some reason wasn't included here. I don't think this is a complete list, quite honestly. I have to get DEM to take another look at it, but it at least gives you an idea of the volume of licensed sites within Rhode Island. And the big takeaway here is we have one that can take food waste. That's not enough to handle that large volume that we discussed earlier, right? We need more sites throughout the state of Rhode Island if we're going to divert waste from the landfill. The other agricultural composters that are licensed throughout the state of Rhode Island are principally handling leaf and yard waste and a couple with manure. And then those that are regulated through the solid waste division, what was formerly known as the solid waste division of DEM. The majority of them are municipalities, which you can see here. And then there's a few private or quasi-private entities that are composting as well. And they are exclusively leaf and yard waste. We don't have any municipalities today that are tackling food waste. Definitely an opportunity for us. So why do we want to consider composting zoning? Well, first of all, I would think it would be the great benefits that come with composting. And we talked about the stormwater management, soil quality improvement, drought protection, carbon sequestration. And the knowledge that this organic material is not, as we said, a solid waste to be thrown into the central landfill where it creates greenhouse gases. This is really a golden resource. If you were to ask a farmer, this stuff can be wonderful, wonderful material that increases their yields. And then certainly, we're here to talk about potential inclusion of composting in our zoning to allow for it as an approved land use, distinct from solid waste. And we also want to create best practices. And the U.S. Compost Council and the future Rhode Island chapter of the U.S. Compost Council will spend a lot of its energies focused on creating best practices so that when you as a community allow for composting in your jurisdictions, that these are following best practices and not creating the nuisances that some people associate with composting. Okay, so a view I did a survey of the zoning ordinances for each of the 39 cities and towns. I think that's how many there are, 39 cities and towns in Rhode Island. And from that survey, there were only 6 that really explicitly allow for composting. At the very top, Charlestown is the most permissive, with allowing for composting in all zones. And then the remainder allow for composting in industrial, some in agricultural. And you can see there's really a varied approach to composting. And to some extent, we expect that because each community is different and has to create zoning ordinances that fit their community. But there may be an opportunity here for us to adapt our zoning, ordinances to be more permissive with the security that they're not being placed in places where we don't want them. Additionally, there are another 7 municipalities that through interpretation may include composting. There are 3 communities that specifically exclude composting. And then there are another 22 that don't mention composting at all, which I believe most ordinances consider omissions to be de facto exclusions. In other words, if they're not discussed, then they are excluded. And I also included one very interesting excerpt from the Cranston zoning ordinance, which kind of defers to agricultural operations as being all those things that are allowed by the Department of Agriculture, the Division of Agriculture within DEM, which I think is an interesting approach, given that DEM currently doesn't specifically list in their definition of agricultural operations composting, but very, very well could. So this is an approach that I thought was interesting and may be considered by some communities. So to the resources that are available to you, CET, of course, provided you or can provide you with a lot of golden resources for supporting your vision of composting in your respective communities. Likewise, the U.S. Compost Council has a number of resources, including zoning model zoning, as well as model zoning guidelines. And I won't get into the particulars because these are models. They are meant to be customized and adapted to your communities. But this would be a starting point for you if you wanted to either alter what you have in your zoning today so that it promotes more easily compost operations to begin, or if you don't have anything today, this would be something that you could use to put something into your zoning ordinances. These zoning ordinances address definitions. There's lots of definitions that you can pick and choose from, which ones are appropriate for you. The exemptions from the zoning ordinance, all of these things are fairly typical for those of you that are in the zoning profession, and also the regulated types from small and large to agricultural. And I'll also mention another item that could be listed in zoning ordinances, which isn't today, which is the inclusion of organics consolidation facilities. So one of the difficulties today that we have in our landscape for compost that supports composting is that the transportation costs can be very high, as it is with hauling anything. So one of the strategies that could be deployed is creating very small footprint consolidation facilities that allows for the food waste to be stored for very short purposes and with controlled conditions. And that allows for the reduction of the overall hauling cost and the overall overhead for compost operators. And just to give you a visual, so these documents are available and I can make them available to you. I can send the links to you and they are embedded within this presentation. So yeah, as you can see, there are definitions that were created by the U.S. Compost Council, as well as descriptions of the requirements for the various tiers of composting facilities. So with that, I think we can move on to any specific questions that you may have. Any zoning professionals out there curious about how to deploy zoning within your zoning ordinances? Okay, guess I hear no questions.
Oh, Heather.
I actually have a question, if I could for just a second. Yeah, there are kind of good examples maybe else in other states. I know we're pretty limited in Rhode Island, but other places that are run really well that you can kind of direct, or someone could direct residents to kind of quell some of those fears. I mean, I know in Warren it was a number of years ago, but we did have a proposal for food waste composting, and the public meeting that we had was probably the worst public meeting I've ever been in. It was like a bloodbath. It was awful. And it was a lot of people that had found kind of worst case scenarios online, and they were just convinced that this was going to be like rats and seagulls and everything was going to be terrible. And it was tough because in Rhode Island, we only had Charleston is the only place, but are there other places that you know of that are models?
Yeah, certainly. And as I had mentioned, CET has some case studies that I'd be happy to share with you. Many of them are in Massachusetts because Massachusetts has a has a fairly, well, more mature composting landscape than we do in Rhode Island. But there's certainly others as well at different sizes of communities. So we can find a community that, you know, that is perhaps more similar to Warren than Seattle, for example, which, you know, has a lot of composting. I will mention to you that Earth Care Farm, you know, they don't take any post-consumer compost, post-consumer food waste. All their food scraps are basically from food processors. So we are yet to deploy within the state of Rhode Island any municipal composters that take post-consumer food waste.
Okay, yeah, I mean, because there was definitely some strong support for it, but it was really not a pleasant public interaction.
It may be too late for you, or maybe you have to wait a number of years before the mood changes to a more positive mood. But if you or anybody else wants to talk about not only case studies, but other messaging for communities to help them in preparation for that type of onslaught of questions and the negative perceptions, happy to work with you on that.
Okay, yeah, it's been a number of years, so I think we're ready to have a conversation again, but want to be better prepared this time.
Could I ask just kind of what kind of facility was proposed, like how large, what type of processing? Just kind of curious about a little bit more detail on that.
Sure, and I don't remember all of the specifics. It actually was the compost plant they were seeking to expand. They had a pilot program on town property, no problems, had no complaints, everything was great. But then they proposed to expand, and it was like people came out of the woodwork. And I don't know, we weren't prepared for the level of opposition. And I think that's, you know, probably as a town, we didn't handle it as well as we could have because we weren't anticipating that. But, you know, I think if it had gone forward, it would have benefited us greatly, and we kind of missed the bus. So, you know, would like another bite at the apple at some point. But it was, you know, it was food waste composting. It was, they do pickups from restaurants, and they were working with Hope in Maine, who's local here, and they had a food waste composting through there. It was kind of a really nice proposal, but it went south.
There is something that you can look up immediately. So one of the haulers that's actively pursuing composting in Rhode Island is Black Earth. So they're more active, I think, in Aquidneck Island, but they've got accounts even in South Kingstown where I am. But they haul their material back to Massachusetts, where they do have composting sites. They also have contracts with municipalities where they are composting municipal waste. And their infrastructure might be a little bit more advanced than what the compost plant has. You know, they've got structures to and one of the biggest areas where the smells become an issue is when you're dumping the materials and mixing it. And if you do that in an enclosed area, that's one tactic for reducing some of the smells. I'll also just take one aside to tell you that there are 2 communities that applied for Swiffer grants through the EPA, solid waste infrastructure grants, Block Island and Providence. And some of those grant monies were to invest in vessel systems where, again, you can control the odors a little bit more than you can with other methods. And I think I saw that Michael had a question as well.
Yeah, my question is about the homeowners. Basically, does local zoning need to accommodate like a homeowner home use of composting? Or is that just something you let happen and don't bother with zoning?
Yeah, generally it's an exempted use. It's not something that's controlled either by the state or local zoning. So to your question, yeah, it's usually not considered, or if it's considered, it's exempted.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I also have to jump off at 11 o'clock meeting myself, so you have to excuse me, please.
Nice having you.
Or whatever you do here.
Thanks for joining us. Any other questions, folks? Ed?
Yeah, hi, I'm just curious. I mean, we all represent different municipalities here, and with the League of Cities and Towns, has there been any push sort of statewide? I mean, it seems like this would be a perfect topic for Rhode Island Resource Recovery to divert weight from the landfill and, you know, maybe just a third bin, you have your trash, you have your recycling. Now, I've been to I visited friends in Colorado recently and they had a third bin and they're like, oh yeah, we've been composting for years. Whether that was through a private initiative or whether, I mean, everything's so centralized in Rhode Island. I'm wondering if that's something that's been considered up at the state level, if we know anything.
Yeah, and in fact, even last year, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, Rhode Island Resource Recovery commissioned a report on food waste diversion. And the report really came back and said it's not economically feasible. I found fault with that report in that it was only looking at a centralized approach. You know, the mission of the Rhode Island Resource Recovery isn't to create a central landfill. It's the broader mission is to help us deal with the waste problem. So in my mind, that report should have considered how state monies can be leveraged locally or regionally to divert food waste. And avoiding the transportation cost from remote communities to Johnston is one way to make it feasible. But unfortunately, that report did not consider that.
Murray, I have a quick question. This is Mike in Westerly.
Mike?
Do you, those encapsulated units for composting, do you have an idea of what the cost of those is? Because I'm one of those communities that one way is 45 minutes to an hour to Johnston.
Sure. Yeah, the InVessel, I think you're referring to the InVessel systems. I don't specifically have pricing, and the pricing would certainly really vary on the amount of throughput of material that you're required, because they come in all different shapes and sizes. But the larger systems would be, you know, $1 million plus investments. I think Block Island might be a good place where we can check. Let me do some research, Mike, and see if I can find out some information on that, because I think the grant application for Block Island would have included that.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure.
I will also add that through the Recycling Works in Massachusetts program, we compiled manufacturers' information on on-site systems. And so it is not an endorsement of any system. It's really just a compilation of just information, kind of like a Yellow Pages. So I will share that as well. Maybe that could go in the follow-up if I don't get it in time before we have to.
Thank you.
Gene Allen.
Hi, so we're, as I said, we're doing somewhat of a pilot program right now. We have one school, an elementary school, La Perche, where the principal does an absolutely amazing job. She has bootstraps that goes in there. She has somebody who monitors the kids at every lunch period to make sure it's being separated properly. Bootstraps comes in. I'm assisting somewhat this year with my budget to, you know, continue that program. And at the same time, I'm looking at a pilot program with Fidelity, who has a digester at their facility. And, you know, because of COVID, they're not producing as much from their employees. So they're looking to try and get a little more material in there, but they're starting with just the scraps out of the kitchens themselves. They're even a little bit hesitant. And I get a little bit of a mixed message, so they don't want to take too much protein. Sometimes they say it's okay to have protein, but they're hesitant about going into the kitchen and beyond the kitchen of what the kids are going to be discarding, because they're saying it's not managed. In one school, we have it great that they do a good job managing it, but in talking to the school department, the other schools, that they don't have an interest in spending the time or the resources to have somebody sit there and monitor how the food waste is being distributed so that it is collectible, you know, without being contaminated. Because it's the same thing with anything recyclable. If it's contaminated, it's no good. It gets wasted as a trash. So, you know, is there anything available? Because right now I'm looking at, I'm providing, sending one of my guys on a Friday. I'm dropping off a tote that's half full of compost to help control the odors, and I'm picking up the one that they've used. But, that's, it's a pilot program, but then once we get out of the pilot program, assuming that it's going to be successful, is there any type of funds or grants or things like that available to offset some of the budget costs for that transportation? And or when you say if you have a drop-off center, and I'm thinking more on the wastewater treatment side where you have odor control and you spend millions of dollars on odor control, but is there a type of a mechanism where you say that you can do the dumping and control that in an environment, an indoor facility that protect, might have the filters and aeration that's necessary in a confined area?
Heather, I think I'll defer to you. You've got a lot of experience with schools.
I was kind of hoping you were going to handle this because it seemed like a multi-part question.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we're
There's a
dealing
lot,
with.
right? I'm
A lot
sorry.
of it is even getting the school on board, because when I first talked to the school, they said they just handed off to their vendor who handles their kitchen. And they're saying that they're responsible for doing a program. And when I talked to them, they dropped off the program 2 years ago.
So we have done work in schools and in Rhode Island also, and it is, it really has to be a partnership, I would say, between the leaders of the school, whether it's superintendent or principal, the custodial folks, the food service folks, an interested teacher, like a compost champion at the school that can help with the students to work on the sorting and monitoring of the station. And I just put a link to, they get a really ideal sorting station, where it can't just be one, like a student-led program. It really needs to be supported throughout the school. And we have experienced resistance in various ways, whether it's in the kitchen or in like from custodial. So one way to just start is, to start small, start with maybe setting up a share table, doing food scrap diversion, in one lunch wave or one school, and being successful. And it's a great leadership opportunity for the students to go to the school committee and to go to other schools and put it in newsletters in the press of what a great.
I understand all that. I mean, I
Yeah.
have an elementary school that's doing an absolutely phenomenal job. I mean, it's a model for the other schools to follow, and they zero interest. So that's the challenge that I have. And so, when you said that it's mandated and there's laws that are requiring, I said, oh, that's great, because now they're going to have to start doing that program. And, the first comment I got was, well, we make sure that our contractor who runs the kitchen runs a program, but they're not. There's a disconnect there somewhere. And I think that's a lot of the problems that is being dealt with, is that there's a disconnect because there's so many different levels and facets of getting this program up and running that, it doesn't take much for the ball to get dropped and then no one's there to pick it up.
Gene, are you involved in a budget process right now?
Yes.
What is that not a partial answer to solving some of those issues through the budgeting? I mean, I know it's very difficult to cut money from a school's budget, but in the budget process, could you put?
The challenge is that, when the reality is you can't cut budgets in Rhode Island from the school department, and but you can cut it from other departments. So, if the school department isn't putting the money into doing this, but they want to do it, now I'm here and I have nothing to do with the schools. Okay, but I'm utilizing our staff to try to help facilitate a pilot program that will run. But I can guarantee you that when I go in this year, my budget's going to be cut, just like everybody else's budget, except for the school.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things that, we're doing more with less, and we're trying to get a pilot, we're trying to get a program together. But there are a lot of challenges that the sustainability to be able to keep focused and everyone focused and get everybody on that team is a challenge. I mean, I have a trash and recycling coordinator, Melissa here, absolutely phenomenal, very dedicated, knows her stuff. She goes to the schools, she runs programs on household composting. We give out bins, you know, give them at reduced cost, and you know, we're very involved in it, trying to get it going, but it just becomes challenging at times to get everybody on board.
I agree 100%.
So one other question is, perhaps there's a contracting, it's long-term, but a contracting opportunity when the, you know, if it's an external food service operation, that it would be kind of written in that they would comply with local, state, and federal regulations.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we're very, I mean, it's a great opportunity, if for nothing else, just for some PR, for a feel-good moment in the press and stuff like that. Having Fidelity with it, with their digester, that is, man, they have like 6 people just in Fidelity who deal with compost, and their recycling and thing, and we're trying to partner with them, and they have the facility. They got, you know, a couple $100,000 worth of investment with that machine up there. It's just, it seems silly that we can't, you know, get everything together a little bit easier. Like you say, it's way down the bottom of the priority list for everybody, but, and you know, realistically, it's hard to justify the cost, because you know, I know one of the gentlemen from the vendors comes in and says, well, you should be able to have less pickups. He doesn't understand that we're not going to save the money in the hauling aspect of it, because our hauling is not structured in a way that's per ton. It's per pickup. It doesn't matter if there's 1 ton or if there's 5 tons in the container. He still has to go out there, pick it up. We're still paying on the weight. So, you know, it's kind of a, it's a difficult thing to justify.
I'm interested in what type of digester Fidelity has, but it's big enough that it's got the capacity to handle. Great.
Now, I can only talk to the regulatory side. Obviously, we'd like to do this on a voluntary basis and ask our schools to participate and understand the benefits. On the regulatory side, the proverbial stick, the fact that they are required to do it. But as I had mentioned before, DEM won't start enforcing this until we have more compost facilities to bring the material to. So we really need to give schools the opportunity to bring the compost to a compost facility. Now you've got an anaerobic digester, which is a great alternative. But getting more compost facilities permitted within our cities and towns is one way to allow DEM to start helping schools and communities in general, and feeling good about doing it. They can't do it until we have enough facilities.
All right. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
I think the oddity in all this is the weight of a ton of trash is probably 2/3 compostable material. And I don't know why it's so hard to convince people to, I mean, if you're talking about 10,000 tons of material, you're going to reduce that by 7 tons. It's a lot of money. A lot of money.
For a long time. The challenge is, in this society, it has to be easy. And composting and recycling is not easy, and it's not convenient. So people don't do it.
I second that.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to solve that problem right here and now. But it's certainly a worthy conversation to continue with. And I think based on some of the case studies that Heather has on her website, it might be useful to take a look at some of that stuff, finding some champions, no matter who they are, within whether it's schools or the community. And you know, we can only go with the kind of incremental approach at the moment, but you know, fighting the good fight, right? So with that in mind, we are about 10 minutes over, so I just want to release everyone who may need to go on and do other things. But certainly, big thank you to Murray and Heather for being here today with us. We're, so excited to have you, and if we want to come back and kind of check in with folks in a few months to see if anyone's been able to get things rolling. Happy to kind of create more opportunities for these conversations in the future. So any last,
Thank you, guys.
yeah, any last comments that we need to go over? All right. All right. Thanks so much, folks. Great to see you all. And I hope to see you on another workshop Wednesday soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.